In the previous video, Truth Tables Part 1, we talked about the answers that the 5 main symbols produce in a truth table. I would strongly encourage you to print out or write down those symbols and what answers they give so that you have them handy. I have uploaded a copy of that into your course, so you're welcome to print that document out and you can use it on the test even. But that's going to be half the battle, is being familiar with what negation, conjunction, disjunction, conditional, and biconditional all do in a truth table. Because now we're going to take it up a notch and we're going to mix up several of these symbols all together inside a truth table. So jumping right in, this is going to be Truth Tables Continued. Sections 3.3 and 3.4 continued. It says, example, construct a truth table for the following. So part A, the first truth table we're going to do is if not P, then not Q. Thinking back to the last video, we said when you see two different letters, the setup's the same. So I need a P column and I need a Q column. You always need a separate column for each distinct letter that you see. And whatever you want the truth table to be about, remember that's your final column heading. So in this case, if not P, then not Q will be that final column heading. With two different letters, the setup is the same. You always have 4 rows. True, true. So both ideas could come true. True, false is the second row. False, true is the third row. And false, false is the final row. Now we're going to do the work under the last column. We do the arrow in the middle last, as long as there are no parentheses, and there aren't any yet. So going left to right, the first thing I see is to negate P. So if we look at the P column, here it is. And remember, negation means to take the opposite of, whenever you see that tilde, that squiggle. So if I want to take the opposite of the P column, and if the P column is currently TTFF, well, the opposite is going to be FFTT. So this T becomes an F, the next T becomes an F, the next F becomes a T, and the final T becomes another T. Since we got to do the arrow last, step 2 is now to negate Q. So I look up the Q column, and again, negation means opposite. So if the current Q column is going TFTF, the opposite of that would be FTFT. So just simply changing everything to its opposite truth value is what we do when we negate. And now here are the final answers, what we do last, the final answers under the if then arrow. You will recall from the last video, and maybe if you've printed out that document where I summarize what all 5 symbols do, that if you have a true pointing to a true, that gives a true with the conditional if then arrow. If you have F pointing to T, or surprisingly even F pointing to F, those all produce true as the final answer. However, the only time we have a false is if you have T on the left and an F on the right of that arrow. Then we get false. So let's be on the lookout for this false scenario. Line 1, I have 2 F's. 2 F's produce a true. So final answer, row 1 is true. Row 2, I have F on the left side of the arrow, T on the right side. F on the left, T on the right, that's okay. That's like what I'm checking here in blue. That produces true. Line 3, row 3, here we go. We got T on the left of the arrow, and we have an F on the right of the arrow. So that's going to be when we get a false with the conditional. And finally, we have 2 T's. 2 T's make a true. So my final answers are T, T, F, T. Just be really careful because the way that the MyMathLab homework is going to have you type in these answers, it's going to be a little bit tedious, unfortunately. So what the MyMathLab homework is going to do is they're going to do one line at a time. So they'll already, for example, have the P and Q provided for you. So here would be line 1, 2 T's. And even more, a lot of times each step will be its own column on the MyMathLab homework. So I would suggest you just complete the whole truth table like we're doing on the video first, and then look up accordingly what to type into the homework boxes. So they might have step 1, which was the negation of P, and they'd have a little box here for you to select from their drop-down screen, or even just type in. We had a capital F for the first row under negation P. And then they might have their own column for negation Q. So you would have to look up your first row under negation Q. We had another F. So in that box, you would type in another F. See what I mean by it's a little tedious, a little time consuming. And then they would have the whole statement. If not P, then not Q. So in that box, when they have the whole expression back again, you would type in your final answer to row 1, which I'm circling in blue. That was a T. So they really break it apart, and they go one row at a time, unfortunately. Then row 2 will pop up on the screen. They'll provide the TF for you, and same thing. So now you're going to look at line 2 under negation P. That was another F. You would type into the box there. Then under negation Q, line 2, right here I'm circling with red. That's a true, a T. And then under the whole expression, that means the final answer, row 2, was true. And you get what I mean. You would have to do that all the way down. So just pay extra close attention to what they're really asking you for on that MyMathLab homework. Let's do another example. So same directions, we're going to create a truth table, but now for part B we got parentheses parentheses not P or Q rather, close parentheses, and not P. So step 1, P and Q get their own columns, and then what we want the truth table to be about is always the last column heading. Not P or Q, and not P. First row will be true, true, always with 2 letters anyway, 2 different letters. True, false will be the second row. False, true would be the third row. And false, false will be the final row. Now, this is our first example with parentheses. With any type of math, you always do inside parentheses first. You'll do the arrow in the middle at the end of the parentheses step anyway. So let me just show you what I mean. So step 1, we're going to do inside parentheses first from left to right. So the first thing I see is to negate P. I look at the P column, and remember negation means opposite. So I'm going to change all of the truth values below P. Currently the P column has T, T, F, F. So if I change it, it becomes F, F, T, T. A good way to think of the arrow is you cannot do any arrow until you have the answers of what's on either side of it. So I don't know what to do about this down arrow, this or arrow yet, until I also have answers to the right of it. I have answers to the left of it under not P, but I also need answers to the right of it. That's true for any kind of arrow. You need answers on both sides of it before you can apply the arrow, because you always apply the arrow to what's on either side of it. So step 2 is just a normal Q. It's not the negation of Q. I don't see a squiggle, a tilde in front of that Q. So just copy and paste the Q column as is. It currently has TF, TF. Try to line it up as best you can right underneath. And finally, now that we have stuff on either side, maybe I should do this in a different color. Let's go with blue. The down arrow, which is the disjunction or, I'm going to apply to what's either side. We need to remember, or at least look up from that document I've uploaded into your course, or maybe you wrote it down when you were looking at the other video, but we need to remember what disjunction does in a truth table. The disjunction or was very laid back. The only time we got a false is if we had two F's. So you might want to just recall, two F's make a false, whereas two trues made a true, at least one true also made a true with the down arrow or. And here was our only false. Or was way more lenient than the and was. Keeping this in mind, line 1, I have one of each, an F and a T, which is right here, that makes it true. Two F's, that's the only time we get a false, so that's an F. Line 3, I have two T's. Two T's makes a true with the or. And line 4, I have one of each, T and F, which makes a true with or anyway. Now, if you can think of it, you only need to keep what you've done last inside parentheses. So the only thing that I'm going to use anymore is what's under the down arrow. So I'm just going to lightly strike through steps 1 and 2. I'm not going to use those answers ever again. Just keep what you did last, what's under the arrow inside parentheses. And you'll see, if you remember that memory trick, why it's going to make it easier for us in the long run by the time we finish this question. Okay, so we have 2 items left. We finished everything in parentheses. Step 4 cannot be the up arrow, because remember, you cannot deal with an arrow until you have stuff on both sides of the arrow. I have stuff on the left side of this and arrow, but I do not yet have stuff on the right side. So I need to first figure out what the negation P on the right side of that up arrow is before I can apply the up arrow. Negation P, so negate everything under the P column. If P column is T, T, F, F, it changes to F, F, T, T. Now I have answers on both sides of the up arrow. I'll do this one in black. So step 5, the final answers are going to go under that. If it helps, think of the up arrow as a capital A because that's the conjunction and. Up arrow is and. And I'm going to erase down here to give myself some more scratch room to write. And here's why I made such a fuss about, if you can think of it, when you finish everything in parentheses, only keep what you've done last. Because now it's easier to see that the only thing remaining on the left-hand side of the and arrow to apply it to is the or arrow, step 3. So steps 3 and 4, the last 2 steps is what I'm applying the and arrow to. That way I know where to look on the left-hand side. Because otherwise it's just a cluster of T's and F's, and it's easy to read the wrong column. So I'm applying it to the or on the left and the not P that's on the right, steps 3 and 4. And we want to recall from the last video, and was the strict one. The only time we had a true is with 2 T's. If you had 1 or 2 false statements, the whole thing was false with the and. I'm forgetting about false and T. There we go. So the other 3 rows were false. Keeping that in mind, line 1, I got a T on the left and an F on the right, which is going to be false with an and. Line 2, I have 2 F's. 2 F's make another F with and. Line 3, here we go with 2 T's. 2 T's make a true another true with and line 4 is another set of two T's, which is a true. So the final answers in black, we can see them. I'm going to rewrite them down here as soon as I erase to give myself more room. So the final answers in black are F, F, T, T. Now just be really careful, because the way the homework is going to have you typing in these answers, remember it's a little tedious, a little bit more time consuming. So they'll start you off and they'll go row by row. So they'll tell you P and Q is TT. But anytime we really did any little bit of work on the homework, on the My Math Lab homework, it's going to have its own column heading. So they're going to have the negation P as a column heading. They're going to have not P or Q they would have if this were the example on the homework as a column heading. And then they're going to have the whole thing again, not P or Q and not P. They would be able to fit it all on one line, whereas with my big old handwriting I have barely enough room, is why I have two lines here. So you would have to really just read this carefully. So in this first box that appears that I have in red, you'd look up what you've typed into the negation P. Row 1, right here, the negation P, you typed in an F. Line 2, the not P or Q, that was what you had in parentheses, what I have in blue. So under the or, line 1, you had a T. So that's what you would type in, or you could just simply select it from their scroll down menu. Either way, you're getting a T in to that box, and then you check the answer. And remember, when they have the whole expression back again, that means what did you have last? What was your final answer? Well, in the top row, my final answer was an F. And you check answer again, and then it spits out the next row. It already gives you the TF. So in the next box, the negation P, look up row 2, and you had an F there. And then under the not P or Q, meaning they want what you typed in under or, what you wrote in under or, you had an F for line 2. And line 2, the whole expression means it wants what you did last. Well, you did the and last, so that's F. And so on and so forth. You do the same thing for the other two rows. I just wanted to give you a heads up when you see the My Math Lab homework. If you're going, this looks a little bit different than how she did it in the video, it does want you to type in every little step that you did along the way. Let's do one more truth table example just to make sure we have it down. One more two-lettered truth table example, and then we got to do a three-lettered example. So I see two different letters in this one. We got negation parentheses, not Q and P. Just like with the other examples, P will have its own column, Q will have its own column, and then negation, not Q and P, write it as the last column heading. Same setup for two different letters, true, 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 false, false, true, and false, false. We always do inside parentheses first. We go left to right. So as I look at the right-hand side, if I'm going inside parentheses first, the first thing I see for a change is to negate Q. Look up the Q column and change everything to the opposite value. So instead of TF, TF, it becomes FT, FT. We can't do the arrow yet because remember, you have to have answers on both sides of the arrow before we can apply it. So step 2 is going to have to be that P, and it's not a negation P, it's just a normal P. That means to copy and paste the P column as is, which is TT, FF. Now that we have stuff on either side of it, I can apply the arrow. So what is on either side of it? It's the up arrow. Make it into an A if that helps, because it stands for and, the conjunction and. And if you think back to what the and arrow does, remember and is only true if you have two T's. Line 1, I have an F, so that's going to make it false. Line 2, I have two T's for a true. Line 3, I have two F's, which makes an F with an and. Line 4, I do have an F on the right side, which makes an F again with an and. If you can think of it, you only ever need to keep what you did last in the parentheses, so I'm going to lightly strike through the first two steps. The only thing left, now that we've done everything inside parentheses, is the negation for a change, because that's the only thing outside the parentheses. So step 4, I'm going to take that negation symbol and I'm going to apply it to step 3. And since we remembered to get rid of steps 1 and 2, it makes it more obvious that the only thing left to negate is step 3. Negate the and. Remember, negation means change to the opposite. So the F on top becomes a true, the T becomes an F, and the last two F's become T's. So here's my final answer in black, TF, T, T. Let's try a 3 different lettered truth table with a P, a Q, and an R. So the example says to translate the following statement into symbolic form. So we're going to go from the English language into math symbols. And after we do that, construct a truth table. An advertisement for Starbucks coffee says, quote, "If you drink Starbucks coffee, then you will not be tired and you will have a great day." Step 1, before we can get the math symbols going, we need to assign letters to represent all of our ideas that are inside the sentence we're analyzing. So looking at that quote from the advertisement, I'm going to start with letter P always. The first idea I see is that you drink Starbucks coffee. So let's let P equal you drink Starbucks. Going down the alphabet, we temporarily ignore the word not because in step 2 we're going to bring it back with the tilde, that squiggle shape. So that means that Q is going to represent that you will be tired. And R, the third idea, you will have a great day. Step 2, I'll do in blue. Now we're ready to go back through the sentence one more time and bring in the letters with the symbols. I see the words if, then, so I need an arrow pointing to the right, that conditional arrow. And the if portion of the sentence was you drink Starbucks coffee, which was letter P. Remember, with 3 or more different ideas, with 3 or more different letters, we care about the location of the comma. So looking at the comma, it hits right after the word coffee, which means that the 2 ideas, then you will not be tired and you will have a great day, those 2 ideas are on the same side of the comma. They both are after the comma, which means mathematically they need to be grouped inside parentheses. So inside those parentheses, then you will not be tired. We need to negate tired, which was letter Q, so tilde, that squiggle, Q. And is the up arrow. You will have a great day was letter R. So our truth table is going to be step 3. And you can see I've already started it. I set up this truth table, which my Math Lab homework will already have the setup ready to go as well. The bad news is when you amp it up to 3 different letters, you can see that it's a much longer truth table. With 2 letters, P and Q, there were 4 different scenarios that could play out. However, with 3 distinct letters, we now have 8 scenarios that could play out. all ideas could come true, or P could be true, Q could be true, but R could be false. Or line 3, TFT. Line 4, TFF. Situation 5, FTT. Situation 6, FTF. Situation 7, FFT. And situation 8, FFF, all false statements. The good news, though, is that the order and the way we're going to complete our truth table is exactly the same, no matter how many different letters or how long that truth table is. So I'm going to bring down what I want the truth table to be about. That was the symbols from step 2, the if, P, then parentheses, not Q and R. We do inside parentheses first. The first thing I see from left to right inside parentheses is to negate Q. So look at the Q column and change everything to the opposite meaning. The Q column is currently going TTFF, TTFF. So when I change up that pattern, it's now going to be FFTT, FFTT. Try to line it up as best you can, picturing an Excel spreadsheet. We cannot do the up arrow, any arrow, until we have the answers that are on either side of it. So step 2 has to be R. There's no negation in front of the R, it's just plain old R, which means to copy and paste the R column on over. The R column is going TF, TF all the way down. So TF, 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 TF. Step 3, change it to red. Now I'm going to apply the up arrow, that's the and, I made it into an A as my memory trick, to what's on either side of it. And is very, very strict. Remember, with the and conjunction, you only throw down a true if you have 2 T's. If you have 1 or 2 F's, the whole thing is false. So as I skim all the rows, I see that I have 2 T's on line 3, so that'll be true with the and. And I also have 2 T's second from the bottom row, that's row 7. The remaining rows have at least 1 F, so all of those answers will be a false. False here and here. As a good memory trick, we only keep what we did last inside parentheses. So really all I'm going to need in the future is that and up arrow. So I'm going to slightly strike through lines 1 and 2. Now we're done with everything in parentheses. I cannot do the last arrow, the if-then arrow yet, because again, you can't complete an arrow until you have stuff on either side of that arrow. So step 4 is going to be the letter P. It's just a plain old P, so that means to copy and paste the P column on over, which has 4 T's followed by 4 F's. So T, 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 F, 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 F. Finally, our final answers are going to go under the if-then conditional arrow. I apply it to the previous 2 steps, steps 4 and 3, the P on the left, the and on the right. With the if-then arrow, the only time it's false is when you have a T on the left and an F on the right. So let's quickly skim for that scenario. Immediately, row 1, I got a T on the left of the arrow and an F on the right, so that's false. Row 2 again, T on the left, F on the right for another false. Line 3 is okay, but line 4, T on the left, F on the right, which is another false. All the remaining scenarios with the if-then conditional are true. My final answers are in blue. My Math Lab homework would probably have you type in the negation of Q, which we did in step 1, they would probably have you type in not Q and R, meaning everything in red under the and arrow, and they would have you type in everything we did last under the if-then conditional arrow. It might take it an extra step in the homework, and it might say, when is the compound statement false? So you look at your final answer. It just means when is the final answer false. There were a lot of times the final answer was false here. So right here, for example, and we go backwards in the table and we say, well, what produced a false? Well, if P is true, Q is true, and R is true. So if you do drink the Starbucks coffee, Q is true, so you are tired. R is true, you have a great day. That's one example where the whole compound statement, the sentence with the multiple ideas, in other words, was a lie. It was false. Another time that's false, row 2. When P was true, Q was true, and R was false. And the third time the compound statement was false was line 4. When P is true, Q is false, and R is false. Finally, it might ask you for something a little bit different than a truth table in this week's homework. It might say to determine the truth value. And if it says value rather than table, that's a good thing. So I'm going to be cheesy here and draw big old smiley face. It's much less work than a truth table. For the following if, and they tell you that P is true, Q is false, and R is true. So I'm just going to summarize that off to the side. So P was true, they say in the original question, so I'll put P equals T. Q is false, so I'll write Q equals F. And R is true, so I'll write R equals T. You could do a whole truth table, don't get me wrong, and then look up the row where P is true, Q is false, R is true, and just look up the final answer. That would be so time consuming, especially because we have 3 different letters. It's much quicker to just plug in everything they've given to you and treat it kind of like an algebra problem, honestly. So step 1, plug in your T's and F's and only worry about the negation symbols for now. So I'm going to bring down the parentheses looking at A. A is parentheses, not P or Q, and not R. So bring down the parentheses, don't worry about them yet. Not P, well if P is true, and I negate a true, it's going to make it false. Bring down the down arrow, the or, I'm not going to worry about it yet. They tell you what Q is. Q is false. Plug it in, plug it in. Bring down the parenthesis. Bring down the up arrow for and. Now we got to negate R. So if R is true, when I negate a true, it's going to become false. So step 1 for truth value, plug into P, Q, and R. They typically tell you if those are true or false. And only worry about the negation symbols in front of the letters for now. Step 2, I'll do inside parentheses. Again, you have to be familiar with what happens with the 5 main symbols. So when I look inside parentheses, I have to know what happens with the down or arrow when it's surrounded by 2 F's. What happens is 2 F's make another F, make another false. I've taken care of everything in parentheses. Bring down everything you have not touched yet. So bring down the and up arrow and the remaining F. Now I have to be familiar with what happens with the and up arrow when it's surrounded with 2 F's. So F and F makes another false. So whenever it says determine the truth value, that's just a fancy way of saying, hey, is this true or false? So our final answer to part A is false. Let's do one more of these. Same thing. P is true, Q is false, and R is true. So I'll rewrite that off to the side again. P is still true. They tell us in the original question, Q is false, and R is true. And we're going to plug into part B. Don't worry about the parentheses yet. P, they tell you, is true, so plug it in. Bring down the or down arrow. If I'm negating Q, and Q is currently false, when I negate a false, it becomes true. Bring down the and up arrow in the middle. Don't worry about it yet. Plain old R, will they tell you R is true. Bring down the and up arrow, negate P, so negating the true, is false. Now we'll do inside parentheses. A down arrow or surrounded by two T's makes another T. So two trues with an or makes a T. I'm still on the parenthesis step, so just bring the up arrow, the and arrow down for now. Now I look at the other parentheses, because you go from left to right. The other parentheses have an up arrow, an and. And is very strict, so if you have at least one F, and we do, the whole thing is false. I'm color coding it. So T and F makes an F, which I've put in blue down here. And finally, one more round. I have another and arrow surrounded by a T and an F, so we have at least one F again. Whole thing is false. So final answer, the truth value just happens to be false yet again.